Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP. I'm Greg Creamer, and as always, it is delightful to have all of you joining us here as we explore what's happening in the world of motorsports. Good show for you this week. We're going to start off, as always, with my friend Cal Fish on the latest news. Then we are going to hear from a championship-winning GT driver on his inspiration and journey to the top of the order in his level of the sport. We're also going to hear from one of the young guns in the Road to Indy Championship, who also happens to be one of the youngest of the RP driver ambassadors. And we're going to wrap things up with a fascinating discussion with a history-making woman who had immense success at Le Mans a number of years ago. But it's time for us to kick things off with Calvin Fish. And I thought, after a lot of evolution in the IMSA and, in fact, in the global GT regulations and how they're being applied, that maybe it was time to do a little bit of a review and see how some of those innovations and evolutions are working. Are they good? Are they bad? And what are their ramifications on a global level? And with that, it's time to start with Cal Fish, because coming up this weekend is the all GT Big IMSA event at Virginia International Raceway. A perfect time to check in on how things are going in the world of GT, with a lot of changes that happened this year. So let's proceed with that. Obviously, at the end of last year, GT Le Mans went away. And with that came the evolution or the invention of the GT Daytona Pro category. We're about 2/3 through the season. Just kind of curious as to what your thoughts are. Has that worked, replacing GT Le Mans with GTD Pro? In terms of competition, in terms of fan interest?
I think it really has, Greg. I mean, I think if you talk to a lot of the big manufacturers going back to the GT Le Mans days, manufacturers like BMW, they didn't want to spend the enormous amounts of money that it took to build a bespoke chassis to compete in that championship. They want to really be able to use their customer chassis, the one that's being used on the global stage, to compete in IMSA for the top prize. So I think what it's done, we were down to a couple of cars, a couple of manufacturers at times, and now it's embraced. Now we've got 10 active GT3 manufacturers on the playing field at the same time. Now, as we look at this weekend's race, and it kind of has a symmetry to what we saw at Lime Rock a couple of months ago, we've got 18 cars on the field this weekend. We've got 5 in Pro and 13 in GTD. So I'd say that's the one caveat to it, is that the Pro ranks is a little bit slim. We're going to lose the ROL car next year as they turn their attention to their prototype campaign. And how do we make that shift? And I think there's some things on board for next year that may change that. We were all waiting at the kind of State of the Union address at Road America to see what they were going to do with the driver gradings, because that's really a key component to that, Greg. And even though we thought they may step back and make it a bronze mandate in GTD, they've stuck with the silver mandate. And we're going to have to see how that plays out, with the shift potentially coming with how the FIA are going to grade drivers coming up in 2023.
Well, that leads into a very good discussion point. Just one observation for those who may not be real familiar with GT Le Mans or GTE. For a relatively minor increase in performance over a GT3 car, the cost was huge to be able to achieve it. So it was very much a sensible move in terms of cost reduction and financial stability and achievability for some of these teams to be able to continue in the sport. But as you said, kind of some interesting news coming out of the new FIA ranking system, with some input, it should be noted, from SRO, who, of course, are the people that created the GT3 category in that homologation. But that interesting tidbit you mentioned for IMSA, not having a bronze-only mandate, which would mean you'd have to have a bronze in the GTD car, in the Pro-Am car, leaving that option to have a silver in that car instead of a bronze has changed things up. But the new rankings are going to have a big effect on what we've lovingly come to call over the years super silvers.
Right. And as you read the new regulations, how they've been laid out and highlighted, the devil is in the detail always. But as I read it, I'd say that any good racing driver with a pulse is going to be a gold. So there's going to be a shift. So I think if you look at the IMSA championship right now, with drivers like Madison Snow, Robert McGuinness, possibly Robbie Foley, Roman DeAngelis, you'd have to think, reading the regulations for next year, they're probably going to be bumped up to gold. So then you get to a situation, do they then become a lead driver in a Pro-Am lineup and stay in GTD? Or do teams like Paul Miller Racing with Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, Turner Motorsports with Billy Orble and Robbie Foley move up to that pro class? I think that's what's going to happen. And I think if they then embrace that, I think if you then look at, okay, what's the symmetry now if we were going to a GT only event next year, instead of having 5 pro cars and 13 GTD cars, we may have 9 and 9. So I think that will make it a better show for us, better for TV to talk about. And I think the other domino effect is that even though there's still silvers allowed, I think for the Rob Ferrials, the Ryan Hardwicks, the John Potters of the world, I think they're going to be more comfortable staying and competing. And I think that's also going to entice other true gentleman drivers, even if they may still be called a silver, to come and play in this championship. And I think it really relates to what's happened in LMP2. When they went to the bronze mandate, it took a while to get traction, but this year, Greg, there's been a really healthy P2 field because a lot of the European teams are finally, post-COVID, we're still in the COVID era a little bit, but the pandemic stages where you couldn't travel very well, it's now boosting that field. So I think that's a win-win. It's going to take a little bit of a time to settle out. There's still going to be some consternation in terms of a Paul Miller Racing. Do I want to go and compete against Corvette Racing? But I think they have all of the tools in place, certainly the team structure, the engineering expertise. And I think when you talk about a Brian Sellers and a Madison Snow, yes, you're going up against Garcia and Jordan Taylor. That's tough, but they can certainly compete, as we've seen so often this year, with GTD cars fully mixed up with the pro cars, and they're all got the same spec cars, same spec tires. So it should make it a very easy move to that pro class.
Well, and on occasion this year, we've seen GTD Pro-Am cars finish ahead of the top finishing GTD Pro category. And I like that idea of, okay, cars are equal, and it gives the opportunity for a quote-unquote Pro-Am program to have that overall class win, which is kind of exciting. And I like that that continuation of that. I think, as you pointed out, it's a really good point when you're looking at a true bronze driver being perhaps a little tentative about saying, yeah, I want to come in and fund a program, going up against teams like the Paul Miller Racing duo, who are very talented, and certainly the Vassar Sullivan AM car. There's some really tough drivers in there. So I see that point. The other thing to me, Cal, that I think is going to have a relatively big role is just because a guy who was in his earlier life a factory driver of great skill, just because they hit 60, they're not bronze anymore automatically. So you can't have one of those guys that in a way is a bit of a ringer that'll be down up against the bronze drivers. I think that too is going to open up that Pro-Am category.
I think it will, Greg. I mean, a lot will come out this off-season when they take the list of drivers, they try and use their new kind of formula, their new framework, and who gets shifted, who does not. You've then got this mandatory age downgrade that was at 50, 55, and 60 for bronze ultimately. And how they incorporate that, I think it's going to be more performance-driven. I don't think it's any longer a guarantee. I think the 50-year-old downgrade may go away, 55-year-old may stay. So then you got to look at who's in which category and getting that downgrade, what do they drop into? So again, lots to work out, but I think everyone has the same intention here. We're really just trying to boost the field, make it enticing for gentlemen drivers to come in. I mean, we have this framework in driver gradings, we have BOP to entice manufacturers and drivers who are funding the majority of these programs to come in and feel they can compete. You still got to do your job right. You still got to focus. You're not just going to show up and drive for 10 minutes any longer. There's minimum drive times. You got to play your part, but you got to make it to a point where they feel if they do everything right and they invest and they tick all of the boxes, that they do have a shot at the podium at least.
And as you said, it's all about trying to increase participation, have more teams, more manufacturers involved. And it looks like that's the eye on the ball that certainly IMSA has right now. Let's look at the World Endurance Championship, WEC. The GTE category will continue to run through next year, but at the end of that, it will be a single spec GT category based on GT3, regulations, and everybody was excited because we've got the convergence in the prototype ranks for
Right.
the top tier with Hypercar and GTP now in IMSA. Everybody thought, well, we're going to have that in WEC for GT, but hang on a minute. Here comes WEC and the ACO with this premium kit that they want to have at the cost of potentially $100,000 to bolt on the car. And what it really sounds like when you look through what the idea is just to have them look different. One, does this make any sense to you?
Well, I see both sides of it. I mean, to me, the beauty of having the GT3 formula is you can take the same spec car and run it anywhere. And with WEC moving to that formula for 2024, it's plug and play. I understand from the World Endurance Championships perspective, they want this GT class to be something a little bit more special. So they want it to look slightly differently. They want to put their twist on it, which I get, and there's two sides of looking at that. But I think for the amount of money that it's going to take, I don't think it's going to be a massive redevelopment of the race car. They're going to try and keep the body kit down to 50 to 100,000 for the teams, which sounds to you and I sounds like a lot of money, but in the overall scheme of things, to be able to compete at Le Mans at the premier or one of the premier 24-hour races that's the price of admission. I think the teams will be willing to do that. I think, again, devil in the detail is whenever you bolt anything on aerodynamically at Le Mans going down the Mulsanne several times at 180 miles an hour, it's going to have an effect. So you've got to do it correctly. You don't want to suddenly have teams that are very equal in terms of balance of performance with their manufacturers coming in, and then suddenly because you strap on this piece of aero kit, they're a disadvantage or an advantage when you get to that big race. So if you do it right, I think the manufacturer will be willing to invest maybe, say it costs a couple of million to do it, and then they're going to get some of that return by selling the kits to their various customer teams. They're willing to do that. They understand the place in history that Le Mans has. They want to compete on that stage. And if you look at what they were doing previously to compete with GT Le Mans, it was tens of millions of dollars. So it's still a pretty good price of admission, I feel.
And you bring up a good point, though, that it's $100,000 if it stays within that window to the teams. It's a lot more for that manufacturer in terms of development. So it'll be interesting to see what their take on that is. And the other side of it is, as you said, if you're going down the Mulsanne at those speeds and you've got other bits bolted onto the car, it's going to have an effect. So to me, that means then that we may end up with a Le Mans only BOP package. That again is going to change things up. And the problem is that if you've got a team that just wants to come for Le Mans, they spend that money, then they got to take all that stuff off, go back to whatever their original FIA mandated GT3 BOP is to go race in these other series. So I understand the idea behind it. But at this stage, it seems to me, a little convoluted, maybe unnecessary. But then again, as you said, the price of admission for Le Mans, that is an absolute marquee event. And it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. But now let's get back to what's happening here. At this stage, you could take a GT3 car and in 2024, with that upgrade, go race it in the World Endurance Championship and still be able to race it anywhere else. At its base, that's a good thing. Now, the WEC category, starting in 2024, will be Pro-Am only. So we're not going to have an all-pro GT class anymore at Le Mans, are we?
No, that's changing rapidly. And as I understand it in the rules, there is a bronze mandate to run at Le Mans. So if there's anyone sneaking under the radar with a bronze grading alongside their license for Le Mans 2024, they're going to have their phones ringing off the hook. So again, there's lots to play at. It's always difficult, Greg. There's always a pro and a con, right, to any change. And I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. Let's put it that way, in terms of making all of these decisions and getting it right every time.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I'll tell you one thing. GT Le Mans in IMSA and GTE Pro in WEC have produced over the years some absolutely phenomenal racing. And to me, it's a mistake not to have a all-pro GT category at Le Mans. It's special. The pros should have an opportunity to run against each other, in my opinion, at Le Mans. And to me, then, big kudos to IMSA for recognizing we want to have a category for the pros and to have pro-only programs, but keeping the rules identical to the Pro-Am category. To me, we've seen that play out in SRO in World Challenge back in the day when you get that period when it's all pros in those cars. The racing is off the hook. And I think IMSA wise to be having that kind of forward thinking.
I agree, mate. It's been some fun racing this year. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I think the one thing, just a quickie in terms of the strategy, I think what was learned by the GTD Pro cars at Lime Rock was if you go on an alternate strategy, before when you had GT Le Mans speed, you could cut through that GTD traffic and get back that track position. And we saw the Corvette racing team doing it, going to a 3-stopper there. That backfired immediately because you come out in a bundle of GTD traffic and you're running the same speeds, you have the same spec car. So it's really changed the dynamic there in that pro class. And I think teams learn from that at Lime Rock, and I'm sure they'll adapt a different strategy here this weekend at VIR.
Well, there are lots of machinations, obviously, in the world of GT racing and the driver pairings. We help to clarify a little bit of that for you, and there's a lot for us to be keeping track of as this season continues to play out. And when we come back here to Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP, we're going to visit with Andrew Davis, a driver with a great history in GT racing and a pretty solid one with Porsche as well. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the capital of racing, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I'll tell you, things are about to ratchet up in earnest here. We're green, and a very special green flag thrown by Dr. Rashmi Kanagal-Shamana.
So I'm Rashmi Kanagal-Shamana. I am a hematopathologist and a molecular pathologist at MD Anderson Cancer Center.
Our honorary starter is Dr. David Beck, who does a tremendous amount of research work through New York University. There's the wave by Dr. David Beck, Race for RP.
So I am David Beck. I'm a researcher at New York University, and I am a physician scientist.
I'm very grateful for the Relapsing Polychondritis Foundation to bring us together and to bring about patient awareness, which is extremely critical.
Welcome back to Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP. And of course, Race for RP is the race to find a cure and a cause for relapsing polychondritis. So great to have all of you with us here. It's time for us to visit with Andrew Davis, who is a former championship-winning driver in the GT category and is still a very busy driver with coaching and driving with some of his peers as well as some of his students in the world of GT racing. And he's got a fascinating story of how it all started and what were his inspirations that got him to the level of success he now has in GT racing. You started like many, you were doing some open wheel stuff. I think you did some Sports 2000 stuff and eventually gravitated into sports cars and seemed to just get connected to Porsche. What happened there?
Yeah, that's great, Greg. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you today. So thanks for having me on so much. But you're absolutely right. I remember you calling one of my F2000 races early on back in the day. And I did start in the smaller Formula cars and really realized early on that my open wheel dreams were probably going to be very difficult without a substantial amount of funding. And I had about zero. So that was all I had. And then from that point on, I began working at some of the local racing schools, the Panos Racing School at the time. And through those relationships, I'd met a fella named Dr. Michael Colley, a doctor down in the Atlanta area. And he wanted to start racing and hired me as his coach. And we went right into the Porsche Cup car. So really my first GT racing experience was in what was the 996 GT3 Cup. And, it was a big departure from the open wheel cars and the Sports 2000s that I used to race. But, Porsche was a brand that I, grew up watching and salivating over the 962 when I was a little boy at Road Atlanta watching Al Holbert and all my great heroes drive. So it was really easy for me to gravitate and latch on to the Porsche Cup car and the Porsche brand. So my love affair with Porsche race cars started with with the 996 Cup. And then it continues on to this day.
I can't help but notice, obviously, the Road Atlanta logo on your door behind you there, the of the track layout. You talked about your heroes, Al Holbert and the like, running in the glorious GTP era, the Porsche 962s, and that. Now we have the new GTP era coming upon us here. You talked about how you met with Hurley Haywood, who was connected with Brumos. Any fun, interesting stories from early in your career when you were making those early connections and weaving your way into a pro driver seat?
Yeah, sure. And I'll speak about Hurley just because he's a hero of mine too. So when I was at Road Atlanta, which it's always on my wall back there, it's really probably my favorite place in the world. I've been there since I was about 4 years old, and when I was those young ages back in the GTP era, I'd walk through the paddock after sessions and go try and talk to all the drivers. And I remember Al Holbert patting me on the head and signing my little notebook, and Hurley Haywood taking time to sign my notebook. Brian Redmond, just all the greats. Price Cobb. I can't. I just go on and on with all these guys that were just hero level to me. So as years went by, I'm still obviously keeping up with Hurley and all these drivers, and then start my own racing career. And at that same time, in the late '90s, I started teaching at the driving school. And at that driving school, all of a sudden, I became just a hero fanboy of Hurley to actually being a coworker of Hurley, which I thought I would come home from work and just be all smiles that I was able to hang out with Hurley and Doc Bundy and a bunch of these other GTP drivers that were teaching Jeff Perner at the school as well. So I would come home and then, and just giggle to myself. And then over the time, started becoming friends with Hurley, and he, gained, some respect for me. And I remember there was a day where we would do hot laps at the end of the program. And I guess I was in front of Hurley and I guess he wasn't catching me, or, I must have been doing an okay job of my hot laps while we were driving the customers around. And when I got out, he kind of walked up to me, in his kind of, low key stance. He's like, "Was that you?" He's like, "You're a pretty good driver." And I remember going home that day and thinking like, man, Hurley Haywood said I was a pretty good driver. And then as you fast forward, to that relationship, it eventually ended up with me literally getting a phone call from Hurley, which wasn't unheard of because Hurley is a friend at that stage. And on the other end of that phone call was, "Brumos is going back to their roots. We're going to run a 911, and I want you to drive it." And I about fell out of my seat. So, it's amazing how from that little kid sitting on the fence. And that's why I always have time for the kids that are at the track, because you just don't know. You don't know what kind of, relationship they'll build with motorsport and how that will flourish. So that all just grew up to a point where then I'm winning a championship for Brumos, which I never would have dreamed when I was that 5-year-old boy.
You started with what is now the Porsche driving experience, helping teach, young upcoming drivers. You're very much in demand as a coach. Michael McCann is a young man that we want to get on this show in the very near future. I obviously announced his dad racing for many years in Vipers and the like. And Michael, when he's made that switch now to the Cayman, it seems like it suits him. And I think he's a young man with a future, isn't he?
I believe so. I saw something special in Michael, and different than some other young drivers. Sometimes there's drivers, they're very fast, and you kind of think, wow, they're just taking chances and getting lucky a lot, but still, very, very talented. And that is a formula for being a successful driver. But Michael, even at his young age, he thinks a lot. He calculates his decisions and his moves and his progress forward. And what I saw when we've moved to this Porsche platform, and I was a little concerned because, again, as I said, Porsches, the Cayman included, they require some driving skills from the driver. So meaning that it's not the easiest car. It's not a numb car. So I was a little concerned, but I found out very quickly that he loved it. And he's also flourishing in the Cup car because he's also driving in the Porsche Carrera Cup Series in his first year in that car. And I've been very impressed there. And I found out that he has quite a bit of off-roading experience. So, he's okay with some car control. And he likes the fact that, you can feel the Porsche race cars. And the Cayman is just like the 911 as well. You can feel it. And as long as you're in tune with that, I've been so impressed with Michael. He studies hard. He works hard. He puts a lot of focus into what he's doing. His heart is on his sleeve like mine. He reminds me a lot of myself, where he's not just total cowboy. I'm going to drive it off the track and drive it into things. And I think that what that means is that he's going to only get better, and he's already proving that he's got that talent in there. So I think he's got a long stay here in the sport.
Well, over the years, Andrew Davis has become a good friend, and always great to have a chat with him and learn a little bit about his wonderful journey and his current activities in the world of GT racing. And when we come back to Full Throttle powered by Race for RP, we're going to go from the experience of an Andrew Davis to the relative inexperience of a very talented young driver on the cusp of great things in the Road to Indy series, and also one of the youngest of the Race for RP ambassadors. Stay with us.
For me, just seeing that there's been advancement in the research for Race for RP, I think is really an important thing to address. We're really excited to see the collaboration that's happening between MD Anderson and also NYU. I think that is really going to help enforce the strength of the platform for the research. And Rashmi and David have really been strong in bringing that to the forefront. And for motorsports, it's really important for us to get the word out there and show that there is research that is being done and things are being advanced. We just need that support really globally to show that everyone's on board with this. And I think motorsports has been a great platform for that.
And we're back with more here on Full Throttle powered by Race for RP. As promised, we're going to be having a chat with Nolan Siegel, who is a young man who is wearing a lot of different hats. One of them is as a young ambassador for Race for RP, but another one is for one of the truly up-and-coming drivers in the Road to Indy, which is a series of 3 different classes that lead drivers, if everything goes well, into an IndyCar seat. And interestingly, the opening round of the championship this year in Indy Pro 2000, Nolan Siegel made a real statement.
Green actually back into 11th, coming back 3 laps down, but this is the final circuit here for Indy Pro 2000 as Nolan Siegel looking to get a win here in his debut weekend in Indy Pro 2000. Siegel pushing hard, got a pretty good gap against Foster, but Foster is closing up. I think it's going to be too little too late. The only other opportunity would be a dive bomb down to the inside of turn number 10. But for a driver like Foster, with the other 2 drivers who finished on the podium yesterday finishing outside the top 10, a second place result would be amazing here for Louis, the Brit, trying to work on Siegel. He is not going to be close enough into turn number 10, I believe. They'll work their way down here indeed. Still about 3 car lengths back. Able to clear Braden Eves, but not quite able to get the job done. And again, it took a couple of years for Nolan Siegel to get that first USF 2000 win. He only has to wait to race number 2 in Indy Pro. We got rookies winning race 1. We got a rookie winning race 2. Out of California, the winner here in Florida, Nolan Siegel. Twin checkers for Siegel, the D-Force Racing driver. 7/10 of a second win over Louis Foster. What a race.
Here's kind of an interesting story. In a way, it starts, as many do these days, go-karts. And that's where you came out of. But, man, you have quickly branched into a variety of different categories of cars, haven't you?
Yes. So I started in go-karts out at Sonoma Raceway, and then I went into the USF 2000 Championship in 2019 on the Road to Indy, and I've stayed on the Road to Indy until now. I'm racing Indy Pro 2000 full-time, and I've been doing a few IMSA races here and there. I did the Daytona 24, and now back here at the Watkins Glen 6-hour.
The Indy Pro 2000 cars, those are seriously quick open-wheel machines. How do you make the transition from something of that performance envelope to something like what you're running here, the LMP3 prototype, or racing in some of the GT cars?
Yeah, they're very different. The prototype and the open wheel car are much more similar than the open wheel car and the GT car. So it was a bigger change to go to GT4 and things like that. But I've really been enjoying the mix-up, and it's been cool to drive all these different kinds of cars.
What do you find to be the most difficult adjustment to make, hopping from one into the other? Braking zones or anything?
Yeah, the GT cars are a lot heavier. So everything happens a bit slower and you have to just slow everything down. Whereas the open wheel car, everything is a fast movement, and in the GT car it just doesn't work. So you have to back up the brake zones, be smoother on the throttle, smoother with the steering, and just slow everything down, be a little bit calmer.
And how about the downforce of the Indy Pro car versus the prototype you're running or the GT car?
The prototype actually has similar, if not more, downforce than the open wheel car. The GT car has, the GT4 especially, has almost zero. So again, that's what makes the prototype a little bit more similar to the open wheel car, whereas the GT car is completely different.
A lot of people don't often put together the fact that downforce, yeah, it helps you go through a corner, but it helps you brake later into the corner. And so when you're in that GT car, you got to be mindful of backing those zones up.
Yep. It does not slow down very well.
Well, that's part of the challenge that obviously you enjoyed just a little bit. The other thing I wanted to mention, you started, as I understand, you mentioned at Sonoma when you first started. That is one of the most technical, low grip tracks that anybody could imagine. That had to be an amazing training ground, because if you could be quick around that place, I think you could be quick pretty much anywhere, can't you?
Yeah, I think it was actually really helpful because I had never really driven anywhere else when I started at Sonoma, and learning there helped me a lot of other places. It made a lot of other tracks seem a little bit easier to learn and a little bit less complex than a place like Sonoma.
Yeah, and it's so technical and so many blind approaches and the like. All of those things that can come at you in a hurry in a car, you've already been tuned into them by the time you start stepping up into these quicker machines.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that makes it really interesting. Where do you want to go now in your career? Obviously, you're spending a lot of time in open wheel stuff. IndyCar, is that the goal?
That's the goal right now. I've really been enjoying the IMSA side of things, but I'd like to continue with my open wheel career for a little bit and see if I can make it to IndyCar, and that would be the ultimate goal.
So you've got a progression there that you can go through. If you do well in Indy Pro, you looking to get into Indy Lights and then step up?
That's the goal. Yep.
Excellent. Well, obviously, you've got a real future in front of you. And one of the things as well is you're connected a little bit to Race for RP. And you're one of the younger ambassadors, if you will, for the Race for RP program. But it's the youth and exuberance that is going to help spread the word and create that awareness. You've got to be pretty proud to carry that banner.
Yeah, it's been great having the Race for RP logo on my car in the open wheel season. This is the second year now. And yeah, it's been amazing. It's been great having them along with my other partners, and had a few podiums where I've gotten to represent them, and it's been great.
And helping spread the word about this nasty disease and the efforts trying to come up with some sort of a solution to it. They still don't know what causes it. They don't exactly know how to treat it. They can sort of mitigate the symptoms a little bit. And people, since it's not a well-known disease, people don't realize how many millions of people it affects.
Right, well, that's what makes raising awareness so important, right? And raising awareness and raising money for research is really important, and it's great that we've been able to do that through racing.
Clearly, Nolan Siegel is a young man with a lot of talent behind the wheel, but also very well spoken and a great intellectual capacity to understand what's truly necessary in this sport, and is already parlaying it into a fair amount of success. Somebody to watch for the future, to be sure. And when we come back to Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP, one of the great stories in the history of one of the most legendary races in the world, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the story of Lena Gade taking her team to success in 2011.
It's hard to put into words what relapsing polychondritis is. It's just devastating. That's what it is. It's devastating.
I think a lot of patients struggle with what is the cause of their disease.
It's really important for us to get the word out there and show that there is research that is being done and things are being advanced.
As a community, we can do a ton of good by gaining even more support for our research and more support for these initiatives to better diagnose patients, to find better treatments.
Only good things are going to happen from this. It gives us hope.
Welcome back to Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP, and really excited for you to be able to enjoy this next segment. In 2011, I had the honor of working in the pits for the 24 Hours of Le Mans when Audi pulled off one of the most stunning victories under the most intense and difficult of circumstances. And the person who engineered that lone car, as it turned out, to the victory was a history-making moment as Lena Gade became the first woman ever to engineer a car to an overall win at Le Mans. And we had an opportunity to visit with her about that remarkable achievement. And you'll note, right when we get going in the interview, she has a very special piece of hardware that reminds her of that great achievement every day. Every time we go to the wide shot, I notice over your left shoulder from our viewpoint, there's this little trophy sitting there with a couple of numbers on top of it. There it is. 2011. You ended up becoming the first female to ever engineer a winning car at Le Mans. And it was one of the most remarkable wins ever.
Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich has the eyes on. He knows he is just seconds away from celebrating once again. Here comes Andre Lotterer into the final sequence, and this ultra lightweight technology has been ultra spectacular at Circuit de la Sarthe this year. Their motto is to always be one step ahead of the opposition, and Audi has been just that today. Get ready to see the Audi Sport team explode as Lotterer comes to the line for the second year in a row. Fresh winners for the 4 rings. Audi has done it again with their new R18.
I actually, at the end of it, I got the opportunity. I was in the pits for all of that and got the opportunity to ask Dr. Ulrich. And I said, you guys have won here through dominance. You've won here through good luck and good fortune. This one was pure resilience, because you were going up against 4 massively fast Peugeots, and there were some other cars in the class. Lost 2 of the 3 Audis, and your car still came through to win it. It was just a stunning achievement. Talk about that. That had to be just overwhelmingly amazing.
Yeah, so 2011 was kind of a strange year for me. I'd done 3 races with Audi Sport as a race engineer the year before. That was post Le Mans in 2010. And I'd stopped being Howden's race assistant at that point and got my own car. He had pushed, as had Ralph Juttner and Joe Hausner at Audi. They pushed to kind of get me to a point where I was happy to race engineer. And they'd asked me going into 2011, you happy to still do that? Like, you want to run a car? And I was like, yeah, I do. I hadn't really run anything in proper racing beforehand as a race engineer. I'd sort of gone into Audi as assistant engineer, done some other contract work as a race engineer, but being a race engineer for Audi was massive. I mean, I can't really put into words how big a deal that was. And in my mind, all I wanted to do was to be as good as all the other race engineers and, have people consider my car as one that was able to win. Now, to get to that point was a bit rocky because I only had 3 races that year, including Le Mans. Sebring was the first with Timo Bernard, Romain Dumas, and Mike Rockenfeller. And then the second race was Spa with Andre Ben and Marcel. And neither of those races went to plan whatsoever. All sorts of things, but a huge learning curve. And it was everything from telemetry not working at Sebring to running out of fuel at Sebring to not doing the tyre test that needed to be done during the race so that the sister car could change to the different compound at night. Then in Spa, parts falling apart on the car, then running out of fuel again. And in both instances, the car making it back to the pit lane and continuing with the race. But I was not totally sure that I was ready for Le Mans that year. And going into the pre-test, there had been a lot of soul searching and some very honest conversations with the drivers and the mechanics. Because one thing about that particular year, Alan, Tom and Dindo were in one car with experienced mechanics and experienced engineers. And then Rocky, Timo and Roman were in another car with experienced engineers who had run at Le Mans and won at Le Mans. And also experienced mechanics. But on my car, I had inexperienced engineers in terms of myself and my assistant, and then a number one this was his first year being a number one lead mechanic, and then 3 drivers who had done 2 events prior to that, with Andre Ben and Marcel. So on paper, we were quite inexperienced. We were quite sort of I don't know if we weren't ready, but we were certainly at the back end and on the back foot of trying to get up to speed. So it was a hard 6 months. There was a lot of trying to work out what had gone wrong and then how to fix it. So everything from, Lena, you talk too fast on the radio, you need to slow down, and you need to remove the emotion. We need you to just be completely flat. And so, if you're flapping inside, we don't want to know that you have no idea what the answer is to the problem we've got. We just want you to be able to say, yeah, okay, car's going to come in. You guys need to work out what the issue is. It's at the back end of the car, whatever it might be, so that we won't be panicking. And it's funny because when you hear things like that, it's quite personal, to be told you're talking too fast, you're talking too high pitched, you're panicking, you're doing this. You have to really look at yourself and say, well, why is that happening? Why am I talking that way? Why am I creating this storm within my team that I really don't want? And I think it really helped that there was that honesty, because I had said to my mechanics, look, I don't have the answers to everything. And if I ask you to do something and it sounds like it's going to be a complete mess, I need you to tell me that, because I will see it from my view, but I need your view to kind of help. And so they were really good at that. And I was incredibly lucky to have Andre, Ben and Marcel, because all three of them knew that mistakes happen in racing. And if you keep looking backwards at the mistake that happened 2 events ago, 3 events ago, 3 years ago, you never make progress. So what they did is help me to understand, look, these are all the things that went wrong, and we need you to fix those because you're the lead engineer. This is all down to you. You're the lead on this car. It all lies with you. Now, fix it, but we'll support you. So if we're doing something that isn't helping you, like, for example, when we come in and give you the feedback and you get 50 different things that are wrong, but we've not focused in on what the one thing is that we need you to fix, just ask us. And honestly, something like that really helped, because it meant that I was able to focus on what I really needed to do and make progress. I was also really lucky that despite 2 appalling races, which, to be honest, I was convinced I was going to get fired for, everybody at Audi Sport and Team Yost had my back. And especially after we went down to just the one car, I was allowed to get on with my job on the pit wall. There was no kind of ideas coming from the guys behind me over the radio or intercom saying, Lino, maybe you should think about this. They just let me carry on with it. We did actually have a couple of issues in the race, which, again, the people around me kept their heads. And that helped me to make decisions to say, right, we're not going to bring the car in to fix something that we have no idea about because the driver's not complaining about it. So just leave him out there, keep going. We are still in the hunt. And then right at the end, the puncture, which was a slow puncture. And having seen 2 massive accidents for the other 2 Audis, in my mind, I had massive doubts about leaving Andre out on track with a slow puncture because it's such a high-speed track.
And it's a combination of the Kronos. Oh, that's McNish. That's Alan McNish.
That's a massive chunk there. Traffic.
Oh boy, that was no. He went for a hole there, boys, that was not there. Look at the spectators.
Boy, the camera guys, lucky.
God,
look at that wheel flying. That is a scary scene.
It was a rear left. If that was to let go, that would be a massive mess for the car. Andre could get hurt. All these things are flying through my mind. And I know we have one more pit stop left. But if I pull the car in early, we're going to have 2 pit stops. We're going to be out of contention for the win. And I was really lucky again that I had someone very sensible from Michelin coming to the stand to talk to me and say, you're going to be fine. You can still do the rest of this stint. It's a slow puncture. It will not let go. It will hold pressure. Keep the speed on the car. You can come in and you'll be fine. And I was like, okay, the Michelin guy's telling me this. It's factually based. He knows his stuff. We're going to be okay. And then the same thing with when it came to changing 1 tire or 4 tires. There was quite a debate at this point, I have to say. I was all for just the 1 tire, keep it simple, send the car out. But then Tom Christensen made a really good point. We had the time in hand with the gap we had to the Peugeot to be able to change all 4 tires. And psychologically, that was huge for Andre and a massive blow for Peugeot because they never saw it coming. They thought we were just going to carry on the same set of tires. We changed all 4. off the car goes. It was a 7-second gap, I think, by the time he left. And I just remember the cameras focusing on the Peugeot garage, and the head of Peugeot at the time, they obviously knew at that stage, new tyres on one car and old tyres, like 5-stint old tyres on another car. And he got quite upset and just walked off because the camera was faced on him. And I remember Howden just saying to me, "Lena, you just made a grown man cry." It's like, oh, yeah, that's not the point. We still got to cross the finish line, and we did. And honestly, up until the point that the car crossed the line, I was still on, right, we've got to finish this race. We need to make sure we're good on fuel. Are we going to be okay for the full 11 laps? All of this kind of stuff. So when I turned around to see my entire team behind me in the pit lane in floods of tears and just this a huge amount of emotion, in my head I was thinking, what's going on? Why is everybody crying? Why is this so emotional? Because in my mind, we'd done everything we were supposed to. We needed to cross the finishing line in first, and we'd done that. So I couldn't understand why everyone was crying.
And we've got Americans on 3 of the 4 podiums. Fantastic achievement. And Andre Lotterer not looking overcome by emotion in the cockpit, but he will when he meets this group.
Look at that. Everyone's there. Dindo's in there. TK's there. Celebration at Audi.
Greg's
what a
there.
day.
Greg's there as well. Take it away, mate.
This crew, obviously, they are just beside themselves at this point. An amazing achievement when you consider what has happened. Right now, the security people are just letting everybody in there celebrate. There are plenty of tears to be found, along with all the smiles, along with all the high fives. The celebrations are just one of the most emotional things I have ever seen. Marcel Fassler right there, just can't believe what has happened here. I don't think anybody could have really expected this when you know what they endured earlier in the race, and this lone R18 in its debut run with this remarkable technology, the remarkable engine that it's using, the remarkable lightweight technology is just spectacular.
And I guess that because I was so heavily linked to what was going on with the car and looking at the telemetry and all my numbers and all the things that were going on in my head, what I didn't realize in the background was so many people didn't see that information and have it, that in their minds, right up until the end, there was still a chance that we weren't going to win, that, after 2 cars have gone out, Audi are in this really tough position. So that's why there was so much emotion there. And then it took me about 3 months to work out what we'd done. It's like, wow, we won Le Mans. Like, that's massive, just massive.
Wow, what a stunning achievement and a history-making one. And for me to be able to relive it with Lena in that interview, just got the goosebumps up on the arm once again. That was very, very special. Thanks to Lena for being a part of this. Thanks to Cal Fish, as always, to Andrew Davis, and to Nolan Siegel, somebody to certainly watch for in the future. And as always, before we wrap things up here on Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP, we so strongly encourage you to take a look at raceforrp.org and polychondritis.org as we try and raise awareness, education, and funding to try and find a cure for that absolutely horrible autoimmune disorder. And we appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit about it as well. Thanks once again for joining us here on Full Throttle, powered by Race for RP. We'll see you next time.